Hello, I'm Jason Rankin, and welcome to the GrassCheck podcast, brought to you by AgResearch. We are bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve grazing management on your farm. This week we are joined by David Patterson from AFBI to discuss the latest information from the GrassCheck plots and farms, Robert Patterson from CAFRE, Geoffrey Malcolmson, a dairy farmer from Newry, and Declan Rafferty, a beef and sheep farmer from Pomeroy. David, Robert, Geoffrey and Declan, many thanks for joining us. David, in the last 2 weeks we have had warmer conditions. Has grass growth responded to these kinder conditions?
I think it has, Jason. Conditions have improved, as you say, and growth has responded. So we're in an upward trend at the moment. I think the recent on farms figures were in the sort of the 60 to 70 kilos recorded over the last week. And over the last 3 weeks, around 50 or so for the plot data, which is always, you're not quite comparing like with like usually there, but it catches up. And yeah, if these conditions continue and we don't become water stressed anywhere in the near future, we should be getting back to a predicted growth rate of 65 kilograms a day. And that might be even better if temperature and moisture, like I say, aren't limiting. Maybe just a quick comment on the trend so far this year. When I did look back over the year to date, we can all remember back to those soggy, wet conditions during April and into May. There was a drop in the average growth there, and again for different reasons, June into early July was cooler than normal, and growth wasn't happening to the same extent. So as a consequence of those two discrepancies, if you want to call them that, we're sitting so far this year at about 80% of normal in terms of the total grass grown so far this year. So that's all a bit pessimistic, but back to the start, conditions are improving. Growth rates, if the weather forecast holds, are good.
So David, how is grass quality faring this summer?
It's an unusual year so far, Jason. I think the sort of the standout item for me and maybe others is the crude protein in herbage. And I say herbage because it's affecting both our grass plots and our clover plots. And we're seeing maybe a combined effect of that out on farm. Week by week as the results come in, we're seeing farm herbage crude protein figures varying from 10 to 12 right up through to maybe 20 plus on a week by week basis, and that's more variable than I've seen before. When I look back at our own plot data to try and figure it out, what we notice when I compared it with just the very recent years, 22 and 23, in all 3 years, including this year, grass crude protein, or herbage crude protein, I should say, does drop down. It's high in the spring, as we all know, but it drops down, usually bottoms out somewhere in that May-June period. And to some extent, that's a reflection of stem and seed head production has almost passed by then, okay? But this year, it has bottomed out and stayed out. It has stayed low. And it's only now starting to recover. So there's two issues there. There's a year effect happening, that it's low and it has stayed low. And there's also a farm to farm, week by week variability that we haven't really seen before. And the only other, you asked me about quality. We do measure everything in grass quality. The only other thing that parallels it to try and explain it is dry matter percentage. Dry matter percentage is fluctuating in around the same period of time where crude protein is fluctuating. And that, again, backs up and reflects the changeable weather conditions. When you look at the farm data for that variation that individual farms are experiencing, never mind farm to farm, in their own individual set of results, I think that, I'm only guessing here, but that might be due to, again, the nature of the weather pattern we've had this year. People are maybe putting on different rates than normal at different times than normal than they might have done in a more steady kind of spring summer period. Our plots are very regimentally fertilized. Every time we cut, we fertilize, and that won't be the case on farms. And the plots aren't showing as much variability as I'm seeing on the farm data. Now, the season's not over yet, of course. So the crude protein is also a bit like ME and a bit like growth rate itself. It's on a slightly upward trajectory just at the moment.
Okay, thank you, David. Robert, it's hard to believe that it's the end of July. It will not be long before farmers will start to think about lengthening the rotation. What are the key things farmers need to do in advance of this? And when should they start to think about lengthening the rotation?
Yeah, Jason, it is difficult to think it is the end of July, and I'm sure for many farmers, they're just starting to think that the grazing season's starting to go right. And now we're starting to think about autumn and preparing for next year potentially. So, yeah, look, the extending the grazing season into the autumn is going to have several benefits for us, potentially, or especially on farms where potentially fodder stocks are a bit light. Maybe more silage has been fed during the summer than normal, or less has been made. So grazed grass is still our cheapest resource, and good effective grazing management in the autumn effectively prepares us for next season as well. But I suppose planning for that needs to start now, while we're still growing good amounts of grass. And essentially it's down to your demand and your growth. So being able to build covers now, when we still have good growth, surplus to our demand. So basically, really, it starts with measuring the grass, continuing to measure the grass. I know for many farmers, potentially measuring the grass can become a bit of a chore this time of year, and it seems that grass is maybe easier to manage and we can take our eye off the ball a wee bit maybe, but continuing to measure and know how much you're growing and know where your demand is, and then starting to push that rotation length out from the 1st of August really. So if many farms are sitting on that 21-day rotation at the end of July, the target would be to lengthen that out to 30-day rotation by the 1st of September. So really that means increasing your rotation length by 2 or 2.5 days every week throughout August, and potentially raising that average farm cover from around the 2200 mark up to the 2450 mark by the start of September, especially if you're stocked, anywhere from that 3 livestock units to the hectare upwards on your grazing platform. But yeah, one of the biggest things to think about when starting to build covers and increase the rotation length is making sure that your swards are clean. If potentially grass quality isn't that great, and there's a bit of dead material in the base of the sward there, and swards haven't been topped or pre-mowed or removed to surplus bales because there wasn't the surplus in the system to do that over this past 2 months, you probably need to target those dirtier paddocks in terms of removing them with surplus if there is surplus on the farm, and if there isn't surplus, look at other ways, either pre-mowing before they go into it, or topping it after they come out. The one caveat with the pre-mowing, it does seem to hurt regrowths more than topping. Topping still hurts it a bit, but pre-mowing does tend to pull growths down by 20 kilos of dry matter to the hectare a day. So if you don't have surplus, you just need to be quite strategic and careful that you don't go and pre-mow the whole farm.
Robert, third cuts are now getting underway on some farms with others to follow in the coming weeks. What do farmers need to work out for when taking later cuts of silage?
Yeah, so later cuts of silage are going to be very important. They're important every year, but maybe especially so this year, if farmers are a wee bit light on fodder. But yeah, making silage is a cost ultimately, and we want to get the maximum value from it as possible. So good silage on many farms poor silage on many farms has no value really. Most groups of stock on farms need good quality silage. So to make good quality silage, we need the maximum amount of dry matter there, and the maximum nutrient content that we can achieve, which all comes down to efficient fermentation. So fermentation is based on cutting the grass at the optimum time, as with any cut of silage, effective wilting and good consolidation. The wilting is slightly different maybe from earlier cuts in the year. We still need to try and target that 30% dry matter, but the later cuts will be lighter, which maybe leads you to think it'll not need as much wilting. But remember, day lengths are going to be decreasing from now on, and potentially heavier dews as well. But the one thing I would say is just if you're tedding grass to get that rapid wilt and the 24-hour wilt, just monitor dry matter, and get the rake in there quicker if needs be, because if we do go over that 30% dry matter, and the dry matter gets too high, you're just going to increase your infield losses. The other thing probably to think about is not cutting too low. The temptation might be to set the mower a wee bit lower and to get a wee bit more bulk into the pit. But all we're really doing there is increasing the amount of stem material in the pit, which is harder to digest and less nutritive value. You're also going to run into potential soil contamination, which is potentially going to spoil fermentation as well. And actually leaving that longer stubble length is potentially going to help your wilting, keep the grass up off the ground a wee bit, let a bit more air in, and it's also going to help your grass regrowth or your recovery of those swards, because grazing of those swards could be valuable as well this autumn.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, turning now to Declan. Declan, how has the grazing season gone for you so far?
The grazing season, Jason, has been erratic sort of, and times very good and times very bad. In the early spring it was poor, late torn out of stock. It went then at early May, it flew, great grass growth, peaked at 100 kgs a day and done really well. And just as once the cold come in again in that June time, it dropped off and it has been up and down. Soil temperature with us has never really come up enough to grow grass and keep grass pushing on,
And what's the current grass situation on your farm?
The current grass situation is what we're growing 40 odd kgs a day, farm cover of 2,600. It's fairly good. Autumn cows are starting to calve. We have third cut going in today, so that's going to help extend our grazing platform out a bit more, which is going to help us probably get over that, the slow growth of rate of grass growth that we've had,
Okay. Jeff, how's the grazing season gone for you so far this year?
Much similar to what Declan's been saying, really. Turnout was a bit later, turned out 20th April this year. We're predominantly autumn calving herd, so trying to graze 6 or 7 months of the year. But because we were out late, there was a lot of grass to eat, as everybody else had. And when you could finally travel on fields, the biggest challenge was getting the wedge set up. So we ended up bailing off a few fields every week, just a few paddocks every week, just to try and get a wedge established. That was the biggest challenge. And then, as Declan said, there was a burst of growth, and then cold winds was the biggest factor here after that. Soil temperature was up, but the cold wind kept stalling the growth. So that was, as Robert was saying, we only really feel like the grazing season's starting to get easier now, and growth and demand starting to catch up with each other. Thankfully now we're drying off for autumn calving, so our demand on grass is decreasing weekly, and with grass picking up, it's actually becoming slightly easier. And this is probably the first couple of weeks we're thinking about taking surplus out. Currently, our demand's down to around 50 kilos dry matter a hectare, and growth last week was just in the 80s, and probably looking like it might be close to 70 again this week. So that's the current situation.
Okay, and looking forward, what will be the next key actions you'll be taking regarding grassland management on your farm?
The next plan is reseeding some. Have one paddock burnt off. We did 12 acres of reseeding back in the early summer, late spring, early summer, which actually got stalled by the dry weather. So part of it actually needs a wee bit of stitching, possibly, if it doesn't come through. But yes, a bit of reseeding just now when the demand is cut down. Third cut went in last week, so it actually bulked well, so happy enough with it. And a wee bit of haylage to take off in the next fortnight if the weather suits.
Thank you. And Declan, what actions have you taken over the next couple of weeks?
That'll be our third cut in now, so we'll be continuing to slurry that and sow it on, and that'll help extend the grazing season for us on the grazing platform, you know. We're also still with free seeding done. We've moved some of the stock off the block for a while till we get to give it a break and try and get reseeding grazed out and stuff. So we did it early in the year. We're finding late reseeding has become more and more difficult up here with us. So that's really, we're just trying to make enough grass for it to take us into the autumn time, like to try and build a wedge of grass to carry that through as late as we can. Ground conditions, some of the wetter, colder ground is not performing as well as it should, and that's going to be difficult to extend the grazing season with that this year.
Declan, how's silage gone for you this season? Have you any plans? I'm guessing that's over. Are you planning to make any more? And are you fixed for fodder stocks this winter?
Fodder, silage, and with the bad season, has still went fairly well. A lot of stock in the springtime we didn't turn out. We kept in and fed away and got them away to the factory. We probably made more silage on the back of that. First and second cuts have done really well. Third cut, that'll be half of it in today, and there'll be another half of it in 3 weeks. And hopefully, depending on how that bulks up, we should end up with, well, it all depends on when autumn or winter strikes and when we get stock out till and kept out till and stuff like that. So we'll hopefully have enough fodder made now for coming up for the winter.
And Jeff, how's the silage situation with yourself?
Silage was relatively good. Again, we took slightly more first cut due to the large amounts of grass that wasn't grazed early on in the season. Second cut was quite light. But again, we went in when quality was good just before 6 weeks and cut it anyway because growth wasn't there anyway, so it wasn't going to go much further. And third cut was actually good. I was quite happy with the bulk of third cut last week or 10 days ago. So we'll plan to get fourth cut off another number of acres, and it's actually a small amount of fifth cut later on, hopefully. But overall, silage pit stocks are slightly down in last year, so we have taken off some winter wheat as whole crop. There'll be maize to go in later on as well, but it got a bad start this year too, so the whole crop's just a bit of a backup reserve in the silage pit this year that we don't normally utilise. It's normally going for combining, so that's plan B.
That's it for this episode of the GrassCheck podcast, and my thanks to Declan Rafferty and Geoffrey Malcolmson, David Patterson from AFBI and Robert Patterson from CAFRE for joining us. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify and Amazon Music. For more information, you can go to the GrassCheck website, www.agresearch.org/GrassCheck, and the GrassCheck social media channels. I'm Jason Rankin, and join us the next time for the GrassCheck podcast. Until then, stay safe.